Manager Employer Investment Project Approval Commission. I'd like to start by asking Tyler if you would please call the roll.
Yes, Madam Chair. Delegate Austin. Delegate Ware. Aye. Delegate Watts.
Aye.
Delegate Krizek.
Aye.
Delegate Bulova.
Here.
Delegate Sickles. Delegate Torian.
Present.
Senator Stewart. Senator Eben.
Here.
Senator Deeds.
Here.
Senator Locke.
Here.
Madam Chair.
Here.
Secretary Cummings. Secretary Merrick. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The purpose of today's meeting is to review roles and responsibilities under the Code of Virginia's provision that governs MEI. First, we will hear overview from staff, and then we will hear from Jason Elkoby about the Virginia Economic Development Partnership Authority's work to develop projects and monitor performance.
Of the MEI Commission. Kendra and I just plan to give you all a quick rundown of MEI, our typical meeting process, and what happens, and VEDP will cover what happens to a project after the Commission approves it. So starting off, MEI was created in response to the Rolls-Royce project, where VEDP committed $100 million in economic development incentives to the company without any legislative input. So quite simply, MEI allows for legislative input into high-value economic development projects and provides a process for members to review and preliminary approve projects and their incentive packages. So moving on to the Commission's role today, it's still very much the same. You all are established as an advisory commission in the Code of Virginia, and your purpose is quite simply to review economic development projects and their associated incentives if they meet certain criteria in the code, and I'll go over those a little bit more detailed later. So what is an incentive? Incentives, as defined in the code, include everything from discretionary grants to tax credits to tax exemptions. They can include general and non-general funds, bond proceeds, property leases, or property sales at or below fair market value, or any other thing with monetary value provided by the Commonwealth to a private business. It's a very broad definition. The MEI Commissions includes 14 members. 7 of those members are House members, and they're appointed by the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. 5 are from the Senate, and they're appointed by the chair of the Senate Finance and Appropriation Committee. All legislative members of this commission must be on one of the standing money committees in either body. The Secretary of Finance and the Secretary of Commerce and Trade serve as ex officio members. You all elect a chair annually, and per tradition, the House and Senate usually take turns chairing the MEI Commission. At your meeting on Thursday, you all will elect a chair from the Senate this year. This is just for your reference. I'm not going to go over it. You all know who you are, but this is the current membership of MEI. So as I promised earlier, there are certain criteria in the code when you all need to review an economic development incentive project. You don't review every single project that comes along, but there are certain ones that do need your review and approval. So it comes before MEI in the following conditions. The value of all the incentives in the economic development proposal exceed $10 million. And it includes a grant that does not exist in the code. So that means you all have to consider a bill in the next General Assembly session for the project. The economic development project has $3.5 million or more in upfront cash to companies from any one fund source. So if you've been on this commission or followed economic development, we've really moved to post-performance payments, but sometimes companies will still want cash up front. So this just allows you to take a look at those projects with cash up front committed to a project. And then if there's in-state relocation of an employer from one Virginia locality to another, and the total package is over $2.5 million. And then a company would like to extend their performance agreement a second time with the state. Typically, VEDP is responsible for most of the projects that meet these criteria. Your agenda for your MEI Commission meeting on Thursday will include a project that meets the code criteria of being over $10 million in combined cash incentives, as well as a grant that doesn't already exist in the code, and a second extension to an ongoing performance agreement with the state. In recent years, we've expanded kind of MEI approval through different bills during the legislative session. So you're required under code to review any expenditures from the Virginia Business Ready Sites and Acquisition Program. You all at some point will look at the guidelines for these programs per the code, likely probably in a June meeting timeframe. Additionally, you review any major economic development project with gap financing from the Tourism Development Financing Program, an investment over $35 million from the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund. And the code also includes permissive language that allows a business or a non-VEDP state authority to come before MEI if they have an economic development incentive proposal that is for a specific company or industry that uses tax entitlements or modifications to the sales, corporate, or personal income tax. And so with that, Kendra is going to take over the second half of the presentation.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to begin with discussing what happens during the typical MEI meeting process. And so that we will get to experience this on Thursday. And so we'll walk you through it first so everybody understands what we'll be doing. MEI meeting is called usually in advance after the Secretary of Commerce and Trade or the Virginia Economic Development Partnership requests that a meeting is held. So they have a project that has reached the point where it's ready to have MEI review and approval. And those projects are usually pretty well developed at the time, so that isn't too far in advance. They know exactly what type of incentive package are interested in offering. The House Appropriations Committee and Senate Finance Committee staff meet with the VEDP in advance to review the proposal draft and bring up and provide some feedback, and so we can work out some of the questions in advance and make sure that we understand the project moving forward. The MEI meeting is called by the chair, or a majority of the members can call for a meeting. And at the meeting, the VEDP will present the project for consideration, and the code allows for MEI to have 7 days after you hear the proposal to review it and then make a decision. The announcement is when the project moves forward, the Secretary of Commerce and Trade will alert MEI that the project has moved forward and the offer has been accepted. And then following that, VEDP staff submits legislative proposals and budget amendments necessary as part of the executive budget and legislative package development each fall to accommodate those and to accomplish and to meet what is included in the incentive package for consideration during the following session. There are some code-mandated project elements, and every project that VEDP brings forward to MEI will include this information in the information that they provide to the Commission in advance of the meeting. And those elements include things like the return on investment, the time frame for repayment of the incentive to the Commonwealth, the average wages of the jobs that will be created by the prospective project, the amount of the capital investment, and the need for enhanced employment opportunities in the location where the project will occur. So now we'll move on to kind of what is required of MEI during a meeting. It is a forum where you can review the projects and ask questions on the proposal and question VEDP about their analysis and the recommendations. Provide some feedback and recommendations for further refinement if there are any issues that arise and that you want to see addressed. And this is also when the commission will determine whether to endorse an incentive package or not. It's important to note that there's a wide range of recommendations which the commission can embrace. It can go from either full endorsement of the incentive or a conditional endorsement with recommendation for further refinement or changes to the incentive package, or you can endorse a proposal in a project in concept and then have further refinement later prior to the legislative review. An affirmative vote by 4 members of the 7 members from the House of Delegates and 3 of the 5 members from the Senate is required for a positive recommendation. So both houses have to agree and have that input. And then the MEI, the commission has up to 7 days after the presentation of the project to determine what it would like to recommend. It's not required that action be taken. That could also be a possible outcome. And then for most MEI projects, the General Assembly and gubernatorial action is required in a subsequent legislative session to bind the Commonwealth to the economic development deal. MEI falls under the requirements of FOIA. Most commission meetings will often have closed session during the commission meetings, and those are authorized under specific provisions of the code related to economic development projects. Just to touch on this briefly, when we go into closed session, there will be a motion to go into closed session. Only the matters that are exempt will be discussed, and then there'll be a certification at the end of the closed session to ensure that that was all that was discussed during the closed session. And then just a couple of key takeaways from this discussion this afternoon before I turn it over to Economic Development Partnership. MEI is an avenue for legislative input into significant economic development projects prior to the legislative session. The scope has been expanded over the past few General Assembly sessions and includes review of financing for other economic development activities that might be outside of the VEDP's control. And MEI is advisory in nature, so it's making recommendations to the General Assembly on economic development projects, and it can those recommendations can range from full endorsement to no endorsement at all. I'm going to turn it over now to Jason Elkoubi, the President and CEO of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and then if there are any questions for staff following Jason's presentation, we'd be happy to respond.
Thank you, Kendra, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Great to see all of you. I'm Jason Elkoubi. I'm the CEO of VEDP. As I begin, I should probably clarify that the Rolls-Royce project back in 2009 that motivated the creation of MEI happened well before I got here, so I do want to point that out to you guys. I will just say that the creation of MEI has really been, it is one of the most important partnerships that we have in Virginia between economic development and anybody else. It is a very, very important tool and important body, and I just want to thank you guys collectively, individually. I want to thank the staff. Looking forward to continuing a great relationship with MEI. I do want to just give you a little bit of an overview of what happens after MEI endorses a project. So once that happens, once the endorsement of a project happens, VEDP basically works with the company and other parties to develop a binding contract. That typically includes VEDP, it includes the Secretary of Commerce and Trade, it includes the company, sometimes the locality, and most importantly, it strictly adheres to the terms that were presented to and endorsed by MEI. There's always a provision in those contracts that says it is contingent upon approval of the full General Assembly and also subject to appropriation. And then after that contract is established, during the next regular session of the General Assembly, we'll bring forth legislation that basically codifies the terms that were approved by MEI, and that basically establishes the code framework for what is in the binding contract or the memorandum of understanding. The legislation does not specifically reference companies by name. It's basically crafted in a manner to enact the parameters of what has been established by MEI. A little bit about what happens once we're in a contract and once the project is actually proceeding. One of the things that you should know is that the vast majority of these agreements are post-performance agreements, which means that the jobs need to be created, the capital investment needs to be invested before the dollars are paid out to the company. We go through a rigorous verification process before dispersing any funds to the company. The way that works is that the contractual agreements require the companies to file an annual progress report, how they're doing against the targets for jobs, capital investment, wages, and other parameters. They also file an application for payment when they hit those milestones. What we do with that information at VDP is that we verify that information. We work with the information that's provided to the Virginia Employment Commission to verify the jobs and the wages. We also work with commissioners of the revenue at the local level to verify the capital investment. And it's after that verification that we would proceed with making payment. We work with the comptroller, we work with the Office of Planning and Budget to make sure that all of this is carefully organized, and that from a budgeting standpoint, everybody has a good understanding of what to expect, particularly with respect to incentive obligations that are coming up in the budget. In addition to that, every month, VDP provides the MEI staff members an obligations report, just keeping them up to speed with everything that we've committed to so that they can anticipate that from a budgeting standpoint. And this is what the obligations report looks like. This is a recent example. This is only MEI approved projects, so this is not everything that we do in economic development, just the stuff that's been approved by MEI. The bars at the bottom are the anticipated or the estimated commitments, the incentive payouts, and that sort of orange line that you see towards the top is the amount of revenue that's expected from these projects. So that you can see this is all ROI based. Collectively, the MEI projects that have been approved over the last several years are expected to create a net of hundreds of millions of dollars per year in additional revenue to the general fund. And then in addition to that, in the obligations report, we break it down by project so that you and your staff have all of that information. I'm going to stop there because I know you've got a busy week. Happy to take any questions along with the staff, and thank you very much.
Any questions by members of MEI committee?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Eben?
I noticed on slide 11, it said that MEI has up to 7 days after the presentation of a project to determine what it would like to recommend. Does that mean that we would have a second meeting, or how often does that come about? Is it usually decided at the presentation, or?
Yeah, I believe it gives you a little bit of time to make a decision if you need to, just get more information or confer a little bit more. I don't know that that has been exercised in my personal experience. Maybe the MEI staff would want to add to what I've shared.
Madam Chair, Senator Eben, I've been staff to this commission for 4 years. I've not had that experience where we've used the 7-day option to review a project, but it does allow you for the flexibility if you need more time, and then we would come together in a second meeting to either endorse or provide our formal recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Senator Eben, if I can add, one of the things that we really try to do is that we try to do this all the time, but particularly if we're dealing with a project that's complex or where there might be questions, we try to brief as many of you as possible in advance of that individually, just to make sure you have a good heads up.
Any other questions? my gosh. They're just that good. Thank you for your time and attention today. I believe we're ready to tackle considerations of the projects, and I will see you at our meeting at 8:30 on Thursday morning. Thank you all for coming.
Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.